Bonjour à tous et à toutes, bienvenue pour cette nouvelle vidéo. Au menu du jour, on s'entretient avec Anthony Spalinger qui est professeur à l'université d'Auckland. Il centre sa recherche entre autres sur les relations internationales, sur la guerre dans l'Antiquité, en Égypte et au Proche-Orient. Aujourd'hui, on va parler de Ramsès II, de la bataille de Qadesh et de la notion de leadership dans ce contexte-là. Si vous aimez la vidéo, n'hésitez pas à cliquer sur j'aime, à partager et même à vous abonner. C'est parti, on écoute. Good morning, Anthony. Thank you for joining me.
Well, I'm very happy to be here. This is certainly a long distance and a long time frame. For the audience, it's about 12 hours. She is there around 11 in the evening, and I'm on the next day, which is my Friday on 10 in the morning. And it is remarkable that we're discussing things 4+ thousands of years ago, and yet the distance here is still mentally and emotionally very great.
Yes. So today you're going to talk to us about something we've never talked about, on the channel, which is the reign of Ramesses II, and more specifically the Battle of Qadesh.
Yes.
And the question of leadership. So maybe you could start by telling us how Ramesses got to Qadesh and what he did to deal with the problem of the Hittites.
Okay, thank you for that, because this is one of the areas that I've been working on and have recently written on, the question of leadership. And leadership is not just leadership in warfare, but this case of Ramesses II is in particular a well-known one, because he went out in his fifth year as crown pharaoh, into southern Syria to attempt to reconquer or really reestablish Egyptian control over southern Syria. Such is what is normal for often these pharaohs of the so-called empire period of what they do. He reached the city, or actually close to the city of Qadesh, which is in southern Syria. It's a great metropolis. He bivouacked on the western side of the river, which is the river Orontes. And there ensued very soon, to his distress, to his surprise, in fact, the attack of his enemy. The enemies were Hittites. They come from Anatolia or Asia Minor. And they already had prepared for Ramesses' march northwards. Think about Ramesses marching northwards, for example, and you see if he's leaving Egypt and getting into Syria, it isn't a day or a week. It's quite an amount of time. Whereas from Anatolia for the Hittites, it isn't that long. And the Hittite king had also planned not necessarily to meet him, but to be ready in case Ramesses did get to the city of Qadesh after he did. So everything does depend upon timing, who gets there first. And that's a typical issue in military events. You get there first or foremost with the mostest, as they say. Well, Ramesses got there second, not knowing that the Hittite king, his name was Muwatalus, had already reached there earlier and was slightly north of the city of Qadesh and hidden. And it was clear to the Hittites that an attack upon Ramesses was ideal, because he was just settling down his first division. So you have here the question of leadership emerging as to information gathering. Ramesses followed a tried and true path, literal as well as figurative. That is, he used the same roads that everyone would have to use. He entered or bypassed key metropolises or cities on the way north, and he eventually reached the location, which is a plain to the west of the city of Qadesh. I suspect that his enemy knew that that would be the logical place for the Egyptians to settle down. The enemy was better prepared. Not only did Muwatalus, the Hittite king, have a great suspicion that Ramesses was going to get caught, I believe he used purposely spies or information gathering people to deceive the Egyptian king. So in a sense, Ramesses is caught twice. He's caught by arriving late, and he's caught because he believed that the Hittites weren't around, because he was told they weren't around. They were far, far north, at the area of Aleppo in northern Syria, not at the area in southern Syria in Qadesh. And so you really have to ask yourself, or interrogate him if you can, at least many millennia later, why did you get trapped? Because he did get trapped. Why were you caught there? He's only settled down with 1 out of 4 divisions when the Hittite king sends his chariots across the river. He doesn't send his infantry, he sends his chariotry across the river because they can get there faster, obviously. And they pierce the 2nd Division, which is still marching northwards to the bivouac or camp area of Ramesses. So suddenly he, the Egyptian pharaoh, is caught. He's caught in his camp with the Hittites, if you will, arriving or soon arriving, and what can he do? And therein is the second question of leadership, really, the leadership in combat or the leadership in battle. But I'd like to separate the planning and the logistics on the one hand, and if you will, the information gathering side of the Egyptians and their false apprehensions from actually the battle itself, where you can see Ramesses is, of course, the great hero, and he did survive. And he managed to recoup the attack on his camp with the help of additional divisions. He has a 5th division coming eastward to help him, and he manages to stave off the disaster. But the Hittite king, of course, is not going to stop there. He sees what's happening and sends another wave of chariots across the river from east to west, remembering that the Hittite king and his troops are on the Qadesh side, which is east of the river, and Ramesses is bivouacked with his camp on the western side of the river. So again, you have a continuation of this type of warfare. Predominantly, or I suspect from the Hittite side, it's virtually all chariots. On the Egyptian side, he's got his infantry troops, his foot soldiers, as well as his chariots. But he does have the fact he doesn't have Division 3 and 4. And he's stuck with Division 2 having been pierced, so Division 2 doesn't play a role. He therefore has to rely on his number 1 group, where he is, in dire straits. He would have been killed if everything went all right for the Hittites, and this extra division that comes in. And so he can manage to, if you will, stave off the Hittite attacks because it's predominantly purely chariotry. There are not enough men, I would say, although I wouldn't say the threat was simple, and the battle goes on for many hours. So that's, if you will, the whole summary, and the issues of leadership emerged there.
And what's interesting for those who actually do not know, they would know about the battle by name and would have an idea of it through representations. And so it can also seem a bit surprising that Ramesses, was not the one actually leading. Well, he was leading his troops, but he was not the one initiating, or was not the one leading the battle. It was the other camp, basically, who was actually...
Yes, they, if you will, put the card on the table first. Yeah. They're the ones who first put the card, except the card was an ace. It was an ace of spades, or if you will, if you want to be Russian, the queen of spades. It was on the table, and he has to react. He doesn't play the game first. He's, in, if you will, always in that slightly weaker position, like if you were in chess. That's why I said that the black is slightly weaker, because it's the second where the white is slightly stronger is the first. That's generally the correct rule. And Ramesses is caught because he doesn't know until he's there. Settled down. He's there. He's already, we have scenes of the camp. It's quite bucolic. The chariots and horses are separated. Some of the people are relaxing. The guards are up on the camp. In other words, a period of time had existed for, if you will, the first level of the Egyptian troops to get in order when the Hittite chariots have crossed the river. We don't know lots. We don't know who gave them the information, who gave the Egyptians the information, how quickly it was. The timing is still fighting. And let me say that the battle is still fought among scholars again and again. For a long time, it was said Ramesses, did win, and he does go home as a victor. But of course, he loses in a way because he doesn't get his strategic objective. He has to depart from the field. He doesn't get the city of Qadesh. The city of Qadesh remains Hittite for all and ever and ever. And to him, that would have been, in a sense, a disaster. Yet we have the records from the Egyptian side, a large number from 5 separate temples, and pictures as well as texts, literary accounts, as well as, if you will, visual representations that we can see him as the hero on the battlefield, or you can see him in consultation But you don't see other things like the attack of the Hittites across the river, the smashing of the second division. You don't really see what happened at the end of the day, and you don't really see pictures so, if you will, detailed to allow us to answer all of the questions. I guess that in a book, and I don't know what would be a very typical classical work on the great battles of antiquity, that's Qadesh has to go in there. Generally, they don't put it in. I don't know why. They put in a more successful one for the Egyptians. This is not so successful, to say the least. The issue gets confused today by how much did the Egyptian king lie or deceive us or want to have the world know that he was the victor. We don't have pictures from the other side. We have a brief note that the Egyptians lost. The Hittites say the Egyptians lost, but briefly, there's no detail given. It's in fact, we all know this is like Rice Krispies for breakfast, and we don't describe what Rice Krispies is for people who live 2,000 years later. So the Hittites just have a brief remark, but we don't have their record, and it's a pity that you can't provide a little game or a serious historical means of bringing both together. So in a sense, you have 99% of information and 1% of information, not even a 75-25. But I think that for your audience, the Battle of Qadesh may strike a bell. I think it is one that's always brought up in the history of ancient Egypt, in the warfare of ancient Egypt, in imperialism, in foreign relations, and the like. It's sort of a byproduct of modern scholarship that is well known.
It's interesting that there are so many sources about the battle with the Egyptians in ancient Egypt, but there's not much. Is it because we haven't found any, or is it because it seems like they didn't really put it on record?
Well, I'm sure that the King Muwatallis, whose annals we don't have, must have put it in his record, because his predecessor and his successors always have these annals. They go back to about 100 years earlier, lengthy historical records of Subi-Luliuma. I'll name some of the kings of the Hittites, Mursilis II, and then Muwatallis. But Muwatallis's capital had been moved because of threats, and it moved from Hattushas, Boghaz-Köi, where we have the major archives. So the major archives being at Boghaz-Köi, it happened to be there, or still are there in cuneiform, haven't been excavated, but Muwatallis's archives are not there, you see. So that's an open question for the Hittitologists to worship, not to worship, but to seek out his archives at his new city, was called Tarkandasa, to find out. He must have had it. And of course, if there's accounts later, not under his reign, but accounts that he won, say Hattusilis III, his second successor states, then I suspect 100% that he's got his records where he's there. One will have to wait. By the way, the Egyptian records are the written ones are basically two major portions, the so-called the poem and the bulletin, and they're the same wherever temple you go, basically. So you have two records in 5 different copies, shall we say. And the pictorial evidence is more fluid. You have different pictorial representations, and because of the nature of artistic representations, they show things slightly different from one to the other. But in a sense, all of these records are standard. They're not too different from one another.
Yes, I actually wanted to ask something. Wouldn't it be interesting if, in the end, again, it's an if, and maybe we'll know, maybe we won't know, given how big a deal it is clear for the Egyptians, well, actually, they didn't really win. It would be interesting to see if, for the other side there, they make it such a big deal, as much a big deal as they do for the Egyptians. That would be interesting, because it kind of is the complex of the loser, wanting to put yourself forward and as the wonderful winner with a beautiful horse and chariot and all.
The thing is that the battle is resumed on the second day, and I don't discuss in my books the second day for certain reasons, because the real combat is the first day where the king has survived and has pushed, I think honestly so, he's pushed the Hittite chariots back to the river. He's managed to take the field. He owns the field, but all of this is west of the river. He doesn't own anything east of the river, so to speak. But it goes on for the second day, but the account in the second day is not historical. It's rhetorical. It's sort of nicely written from a more literary, rhetorical point of view that you can't grasp what is happening except in the Egyptian mentality, if you will, the ideology of kingship. The Hittite king asks for peace on the second day. That's all. He asks for peace. Whether that means a negotiation had set into place. I suspect there was some type of battle on the second day. It would have had to be pre-planned in a sense, because they both know they're there. They know where they're going to fight. They know how they're going to fight on day two. So I think there's a battle. So I try to interpret it as a battle of honor in the requirements of warfare that has to go on and has to be seen what will happen afterwards. And that's finished. And then there's negotiation. And clearly Ramesses is allowed to leave. He's not going to be attacked from the rear. It's important. Or on the way back. I don't know if that could happen, but from the rear, yes. As for the connected issue of, which we don't know, casualties, and war material lost. Well, the Hittites don't get those chariots back, and there's at least 2,000 or so odd gone. We do have a list of their names, some of the names, the big men, not the little ones, not like you and me, and only the basically very close to the Hittite king are the men listed, or they're chiefs of the allies of the Hittites. The other ones aren't there. And they clearly either are dead on the battlefield or they have become waterlogged and have managed to be rescued. But by and large, that's all we have. We don't really have numbers. We don't have much evidence afterwards. The casualties on that side, as well as the Egyptian casualties. I cannot imagine the Egyptian casualties were low or medium, at least in the first wave. They got caught by chariots. In a sense, it's a stockade situation of defense at the beginning. But I can't answer those questions. And I only would say in honesty that everything may rely upon what occurred on day two, and we don't know what occurred on day two. All fairness to everyone, except for the fact that the negotiation occurred, the Egyptians are allowed to leave. Fine. That's all I would say. And that's why I think that he does lose strategically. It's a strategic defeat for the Egyptians. He managed, but he didn't win the prize, basically. And for the leadership, I would say he doesn't come off as the top rank, say an A+ or even an A level, but you have to grant everything else. So it's in a sense someone who struggles very well, survives in struggling, survives very well, but just didn't get there,
And what happened to the other divisions then?
Well,
did they catch up?
They come up around 4:35 in the afternoon, close to twilight. Not twilight yet, but close to twilight. Twilight's about 5, 6 o'clock, really, in the evening. And he doesn't greet them according to the text. He just chastises them. What he does, though, and this is, again, part of his attribute of personality connected to leadership, he blames those people. He blames them for not showing loyalty, and he blames the administrators, the non-military people, administrators of foreign countries. He blames his soldiers, all levels, from the foot soldier up to his officers, and I guess everyone that was connected on his side with the disaster, not himself. And he blames it because, all the way through, there is this concept of loyalty, and that's my interpretation against one other major scholar that I consider the issue of the account, the so-called Qadesh poem, that's the text's name, is based on the loyalty that they did not show, according to the king. Now, he shows loyalty to his godfather, with the dash there, please. Amun, you know, Amun of Karnak, Amun of Thebes, Amun of Egypt, the titular deity of all. He shows the loyalty, and he talks to him, he implores him when he's attacked. So you have, in a sense, a two-way situation. Pharaoh with the arrow upwards, and soldiers with the arrow upwards. Soldiers to Pharaoh, Pharaoh to God, if you will, or to Amun. And he gets the reciprocation by definition because he's always loyal to Amun. He doesn't get the loyalty he claims from the soldiers. But who's fighting with him? Who is Division 1 in this extra division from the north? He's got soldiers fighting. He does manage to repel the first attack. He wins the first battle. He wins the second battle. He essentially won the battle of the day, the whole events, not by himself. But you see, for leadership, his self-conception or his self-definition requires that interpretation of loyalty to come through. And I think that's the crux of the text itself, the literary text. The historical account is based on loyalty.
Thank you very much, Denis, for being here with us and discussing the battle and giving us a bit more information on the topic.
Thank you very much. And I also thank the audience for listening in or watching it. Thank you. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye. J'espère que vous avez aimé la vidéo. Si vous voulez en savoir davantage sur le sujet, je vous encourage à aller lire les ouvrages qui s'affichent quelque part sur l'écran. Je laisse les liens dans la description de la vidéo, puis je vous dis à bientôt.